1. The Doctor catapulted from the TARDIS, sonic screwdriver held out in front of him. He pivoted on his heels, turning a full circle. Come on, he muttered. Martha stepped out of the TARDIS behind him, a look of gleeful expectation on her face. When she saw she was in the backyard between a couple of smelly bins, rather than on some alien planet with pink skies and purple grass, she frowned. "Is this where the signal was coming from?" she asked. "It wasn't a signal," he said absently. "More a sort of splurge. A big fat splurge of power." "But what kind of power? I mean, what made it so special?" "It was old," he said, still not looking at her. "How old?" "Oh, very, 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 very old, I'd say. Old enough to make my teeth itch. And my palms." He examined the palm of his left hand thoughtfully. "Maybe I'm allergic." "You'd better avoid Keith Richards then," said Martha. "He'd bring you out in hives." The sonic screwdriver didn't bleep or shine brighter or anything, but suddenly the Doctor shouted, "You beauty! Go on, girl!" Next second, he was running towards a gate in the high fence surrounding the yard, all bony knees and elbows, his spiky, tousled hair seeming to fizz with energy. Martha ran after him. She both loved and hated it when he was like this. She found it exhilarating and frustrating at the same time. He was a bit like a brilliant but temperamental racehorse. Sometimes all you could do was hang on for dear life and hope you wouldn't fall off and be left on the track, coughing and spluttering in his wake. "So, where are we?" she shouted as he yanked back the bolts on the gate and threw it open. "Somewhere in New England," he called over his shoulder. "Is that New England on New Earth or New England in old America?" "The second one," he said. They followed whatever signals the Doctor was getting from the sonic for maybe 15 minutes. To Martha's relief, they didn't run the whole time. The Doctor alternated his pace between sprinting, jogging and strolling, depending on the strength or accuracy of the signal. A few times he stopped completely and cast about in a circle. On one occasion, he even pointed the sonic straight up at the darkening sky before shaking his head. During their search, Martha looked around as much as she was able, drinking in her surroundings. It turned out they had landed behind an ice cream parlour called Harry Ho's, which was one of numerous stores and eating places fringing the main tree-lined square of a small picturesque town called Blackwood Falls. She got the name of the place from a big banner strung across the main street advertising the Blackwood Falls Halloween Carnival. Even without the banner, she would have guessed the time of year simply from the profusion of window displays featuring carved pumpkins, witches, ghosts, skeletons, and the like. She thought the green mist which began to envelop them as they moved out from the town centre and into the suburbs was taking things a bit too far, though. The mist was odourless but chilly. It felt like someone caressing her cheeks with cold fingers. "Doctor, what is this stuff?" she asked. He shrugged. He'd slowed to a walking pace now, which he seemed, for the moment, content to maintain. "One thing it's not is of this earth." "It's alien, you mean?" She linked her arm with his. She didn't want him to bolt off again and lose her in the fog. "Is it sentient?" "Nah, it's just a byproduct of the energy splurge." He grinned. "That, yeah." "It's not toxic, is it?" "Don't think so. Least, I'm not picking up anything." 3 minutes later, he stopped outside the gate of what appeared to be a big clapboard house with a long front porch. It was hard to tell because the mist seemed to be at its thickest here, reducing the building to a dark, blocky haze. "It's here," he said. "In the house?" "Behind it. Come on!" He vaulted the fence and ran across the lawn and up the side of the house, Martha in tow. She felt a tingle of excitement, wondering what marvels were in store for her this time. "A dead tree?" she said. "Is that it?" The doctor prowled around the base of the tree, his hands in his trouser pockets. He produced a pair of black-rimmed spectacles and slipped them on, then bent over to peer at something. "Oh, look," he said, "a hole." Martha stood beside him, wrinkling her nose. The mist might not smell of anything, but the tree, or something close to it, did. It was the smell of something dead. "A burrow?" she ventured. "I'd say it's more likely someone's been digging," said the doctor. "Look how smooth the sides are. I wonder what they found." "You think something old and alien was lying dormant under here, and that when it was dug up it came alive and sent out that power splurge?" The doctor gave her one of his heart-melting grins. "That's what I love about you, Martha Jones," he cried. "You use your brain." Martha tried not to look flattered. She watched as the doctor examined one of the black, warty growths that covered the tree. He put his face up so close to it, she expected him to sniff it, or maybe even give it a lick. Instead, he whipped out his trusty sonic again, pointed it at the growth, and turned it on. The result was spectacular. The growth, plus another dozen or so close to it, unfurled and launched itself from the tree. All at once, Martha found herself fighting off squealing, fist-sized creatures which appeared to be composed of spindly, thrashing tangles of black roots. She felt them scratching her hands and scuttling lopsidedly up the sleeves of her jacket to reach her face. Repulsed, she batted and clawed at them, but each time she managed to fling one away, it propelled itself back into the fray. Beside her, the doctor was fighting a similar battle. He tried zapping the creatures with his sonic, but that only seemed to enrage them. Martha became vaguely aware that he was fighting off the rooty things with one hand, while scrabbling in a jacket pocket with the other. It wasn't until she saw a jet of flame, however, that she allowed herself to glance across at what he was doing. He had taken a candle from his coat pocket and somehow turned it into a mini flamethrower with the aid of his sonic screwdriver. He was sweeping it in an arc in front of him now, and it was working. Terrified of the fire, the root creatures were retreating, scuttling back to the tree and burrowing into the soft earth at its base, like baby chicks seeking security beneath the soft, warm body of their mother. Within 30 seconds, the last of the creatures had disappeared. Martha stood on shaky legs, breathing heavily, trying to rid her mind of the scratchy, crawly feel of their bodies on her skin. "Well," said the doctor conversationally, "that was unexpected." Martha gave one last almighty shudder. What were those things? "Some kind of defence system, I'd say, protecting the big mama here." He blew out the candle. Martha gave him a wry look. "I can't believe the amount of stuff you've got in your pockets." He flipped the candle over his shoulder, caught it neatly behind his back without looking, and slipped it back into his pocket. "Left over from a Barry Manilow concert. Madison Square Garden, 1990. Great gig." He began to warble the opening bars of Mandy. "Don't do that," said Martha quickly. The doctor gave a wistful smile. "Brings a tear to your eye, does it?" "Yeah, but not in a good way." "Hey," a voice called behind them, "do you mind telling me what you're doing on my property?" The doctor and Martha turned to see a tall man striding towards them through the green mist. He looked, thought Martha, like a nice ordinary bloke, albeit a bit disgruntled. "We're trespassing," said the doctor cheerfully. The man looked taken aback. "Okay," he said slowly. "Well, do you mind telling me why you're trespassing?" The doctor flashed a look at Martha. Actually, we're not trespassing, we're..." He produced his psychic paper and held it up in front of the man's face. "Whatever it says here." The man took the psychic paper and peered at it. "Environmental health and safety operative," he murmured. "Yep," said the doctor, "that's me." He leaned forward and suddenly seemed to become very serious. "Are you aware, Mr. Pirelli, that you possess a very dangerous tree?" The man looked up at the tree uncertainly. "Dangerous?" "Lethal," said Martha. The man licked his lips. "In what way?" The doctor put a reassuring hand on Mr. Pirelli's shoulder. Instead of answering his question, he said, "Tell me, Mr. Pirelli, has anyone, to your knowledge, dug anything up here recently?" "Well, my son and his friends were digging here earlier. They said they were looking for buried treasure. You know how boys are." "And where's your son now, Mr. Pirelli?" the doctor asked, his gaze intense, his eyes appearing almost black. They headed into town to get their costumes for tomorrow night. Tozier's Costume Emporium." Martha thought the doctor's next question would be to ask where that was, but he surprised her by saying, "Across from Harry Ho's ice cream place. Big clown in the window." Mr. Pirelli nodded. "Cheers, Mr. P. Come on, Martha." The doctor began to stride away. Martha gave the bemused man a sympathetic smile and followed the doctor. "My son's not in trouble, is he?" Mr. Pirelli called after her. Crossing her fingers, Martha said, "Don't worry, Mr. Pirelli, we'll sort it out. I'm sure everything will be fine." She was about to break into a jog when something occurred to her. "What's your son's name, by the way?" "Rick," he said. She caught up with the doctor on the pavement heading back into town. He was in brooding mode, hands in pockets, head down. He murmured something as she came abreast of him. "What?" she said. He stopped, licked a forefinger, and held it up as though testing the wind direction. "Can you feel that?" he asked. She could. There was a sense of oppressiveness in the atmosphere, like someone pressing down on her shoulders. "Yes," she said. "But what is it?" He looked into her eyes. His face was set and serious. So quietly that it made her shiver, he muttered, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes."